Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, the impact of sweeping changes at the nation's Election Assistance Agency. Also tonight, the impact of a climate science denier in charge of assessing climate's impact on the U.S. And the role of nonprofit health research in a time of declining federal funding. Those stories and more next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. President Trump recently removed members of a bipartisan federal election commission in yet another move by the president to exert White House influence over how U.S. elections are conducted. For more on this, we welcome Bill Gates, Executive Director of ASU's Mechanics of Democracy Lab. Bill, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the Elections Assistance Commission is where all this happened. I never even knew such a thing existed.
Well, you're not alone, Ted, but this is a group that's been around since about 2002, after the Bush v. Gore excitement down in Florida. This commission was created as part of the Help America Votes Act, and it's a bipartisan group, so it has 4 commissioners, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. They have several roles that they serve, but they kind of fall within the realm of providing federal grants to local election offices, also certifying election machines, and certifying other sort of technical pieces within the elections process. But it's primarily voluntary role that it plays within elections.
Voluntary meaning the states ask for it as opposed to being mandated to?
That's right, exactly. It's not these, like for example, it's not required that the voting machines be certified by the EAC, but they do provide it. And some states, look to that as an important element in what they do with certification of voting machines.
So the commission does not count votes?
Correct.
Does not administer elections?
No, it does not.
All right, so this is a bipartisan federal agency, certified voting tech and sending grants out. Why did the president fire 2 Democratic members and let the lone remaining Republican member, I guess, was on the board, allowed that member to resign? Why did all this happen?
Well, I think the president was not happy with the fact that the EAC had failed to make certain radical changes to the way that we run elections in this country. And I believe that he felt, based upon the Slaughter decision, the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, that he had the authority to do it, and so that's why he did it.
It happened like a week after that decision, didn't it?
That's correct. People had sort of expected this for a long time. In fact, Tom Hicks, who is one of the commissioners, spoke to my class last year here at ASU, and he said, I could be removed from office at any time by the president.
Yeah, and he was. All right, so it sounded like the commission resisted, as you mentioned, change that the president wanted to see on a variety of national voting, especially that national voting form. It's stickler here in Arizona for quite a while. Talk to us about what he wanted, what the commission was a little reluctant to do.
Yeah, well, he wanted to see changes, for example, as it relates to requiring that documented proof of citizenship, which, by the way, we have here in Arizona, but that's not a national requirement. It's a very small number of states, and the EAC was not in a position to do that. And so, essentially he was saying they're not helpful, and so let's just move forward and let's remove these commissioners from office.
So everyone's out there. Is he going to put some new commissioners in, and they're all going to, it's got to be 2 Democrats. You got to find a couple of Democrats that are happy with him.
Yeah, even if the president does choose to nominate commissioners, they still have to be approved by the Senate.
Interesting.
So it's unlikely at this point. We'll probably move forward with no commissioners, which, by the way, we saw that for several years in the 2000s, and the EAC continued to operate.
Interesting. Does it change at all upcoming elections, whether it's primary elections around the country, ours obviously tomorrow, but in November? Does it change much at all?
This is the important thing for your viewers to know, is that it doesn't. Elections are run at the local level. This made news, it made headlines, but it doesn't affect the ballot that voters are going to receive, or the process that they're going to deal with.
But it sounds like it might complicate maybe the testing and certification of voting machines, wouldn't it?
No, we're not expecting that because, for example, those machines that have been certified, just because the commissioners are removed from office, it doesn't mean that they're decertified. And we're so close to the election. For example, we have a primary tomorrow here in Arizona.
Right.
So we do not anticipate, you talk to experts across the U.S., they don't impact any sort of an impact on voting as a result of this move by the president.
I want to get to the county agreement between the recorder and the Board of Supervisors here in a second, but the president in his recent speech regarding elections said that U.S. elections are indefensible, that the U.S. has been hacked and compromised in the past, and that no third world country had it as bad as we had it. What do you make of those statements?
Well, they're simply not true. And I, as my Exhibit A that I would present to you is the 2020 election here in the state of Arizona, and specifically in Maricopa County. It was the most reviewed, the most audited election in the history, I would argue, of the world. And what did they find? There were 50 ballots that needed to be rerun. President Trump is upset about the fact that he lost that election, and so he continues to litigate it.
Are you worried that his words that during that speech would be a precursor of some kind to challenge the midterm elections? Because a lot of people are.
Well, unfortunately, we have seen this in the past from he and some of his allies. But I have to say, Ted, there was really nothing new in that speech. I've heard some refer to it as a nothing burger. It's not a nothing burger to the extent that it raises questions about the good people that run elections across this country, the incredible systems that are in place, the fact that we have Republicans and Democrats working together and eyeballs on everything throughout this process, and finally the fact that elections are run at the local level. Thousands and thousands of jurisdictions and run by our friends, our neighbors. So despite what the president said, I remain confident in our elections and how they're going to be run this year.
Speaking of the local level, are you confident that the agreement between the Board of Supervisors and the county recorder, which will, I guess, be affected after the primary for the general and for the future, the primary, I think, still has a Supreme Court temporary rules in place. The agreement is in place. What do you make of it?
I think that the agreement being in place is a good step. As you know, the recorder and the Board of Supervisors were involved in litigation since last year. This now gives clarity on some of these issues that were up in the air. And I think that's good for voters. I think it was becoming a distraction for folks. And best of all, if there are any disputes as we move forward, there is a special master who's a judge, Judge Chris Corey, who, if these issues come up, they can go talk to him and he will serve as like a neutral arbiter. I think that's exactly what we need. He's taken the time to learn about this agreement and the separation of election responsibilities. So I am bullish on the general election.
What do you make of the fact, though, that cooperation seems to be not a part of this agreement? I mean, there are lines of demarcation and they are strong.
Well, the system that we had in place with both Recorder Fontes and Recorder Richer was one approach where we were very intertwined in those operations. That is not possible given the current structure and relationship between the board and the recorder. I think this new agreement recognizes that, and it actually sets up both sides for the highest likelihood of success with this election in November.
Last question real quickly here. One of the supervisors is worried that the county recorder, who is associates with election deniers, will put his thumb, quote, thumb on the scale. You worried about that?
For me, I mean, I understand the concern for folks and some of the comments that have been made in the past, but I know that the recorder's office has a lot of great people in there who have integrity, and so I have confidence that this election is going to be run well on both the board side and the recorder side.
Bill Gates, ASU Mechanics of Democracy Lab. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
When you support Arizona PBS, you plant a seed. Seeds that provide educational outreach in our community. Seeds that put our digital resources to work. Seeds that foster the trusted news coverage you expect from PBS. And seeds that continue the amazing PBS programs you love. But our garden can't keep growing without your support. Visit our website to see all the ways you can help our garden grow. Plant a seed with Arizona PBS today.
In this episode, actors Delroy Lindo and Liza Colón Zayas uncovered their roots.
This is a wild ride.
Did you have any idea?
No.
It's as if figures are emerging through a fog.
Did you ever think you would learn the name of an enslaved ancestor?
My people fight hard.
Please turn the page.
Pieces of myself are being filled in.
Tuesday night at 7 on Arizona PBS.
The National Climate Assessment is under new leadership as the Trump administration installed a climate science denier to run the government's climate report, which is congressionally mandated to look at how Americans are affected by climate change. Joining us now is Dave White, director of ASU's Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation. He's also the lead author of the Southwest chapter of the 5th National Climate Assessment a few years ago. Dave, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
So what is the U.S. Global Change Research Program? Again, I'd never heard of this until now.
Well, the U.S. Global Change Research Program was created in 1990 by an act of Congress signed by President George H.W. Bush. And that program is responsible for coordinating across 15 federal agencies to ensure that those agencies cooperate to produce every 4 years an assessment of the effects of global change on the U.S., including on the U.S.'s economy and its environment.
And this is, again, mandated by Congress.
Yes, the report, the agency, the U.S. Global Change Research Program, and the National Climate Assessment that it oversees are mandated by Congress.
Now, there was a portal in which you could look at past reports. That was closed by President Trump, saying it was a vehicle for political agendas and it was not sound science. What do you make of that?
Well, yes, climatechange.gov, which was the portal that retained all of not only the reports from the prior cycles, but also a treasure trove of valuable information, decision support systems, data, and tools that were incredibly useful to local governments, states, businesses, insurance agencies, and others to help incorporate and factor in climate change and climate risk into decision making. So yes, unfortunately, the portal remains offline, although there are some nonprofit organizations and other parts of the government, including the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which retains some of that information.
Interesting. All right, the assessment now, this Global Change Research Program and the assessment is now being run by a gentleman named Matthew Wielicki. He has no history of climate science. Indeed, he is a climate science denier. Your thoughts?
So this is a really unfortunate appointment and one that reflects an ongoing trend in the Trump administration to attempt to undermine the credibility, the reliability, and the validity of climate science produced and supported by the federal government. The new appointment of Professor Wielicki to lead the Global Change Research Program, unfortunately, is a continuation of a politicization of this agency and this space, and reflects the administration's undermining of credible scientific information that's absolutely necessary to help Americans adapt to a changing climate.
He's a former geochemist. Does that make sense to have someone like that involved
Well,
in climate?
there are a wide range of scientific disciplines that are relevant to understanding climate change. The new director of USGCRP has no significant publication or scientific credentials in climate science. He was an unsuccessful academic, was not able to earn tenure at the University of Alabama, and has fashioned himself somewhat as a maverick outsider, which in my estimation is actually a cover-up for simply not having credentials that he would require to run such an important agency and report.
And yet he says that climate science believers are, quote, being sold snake oil.
Yeah, this is just one illustration of how his comments put him completely outside the consensus of the scientific community, both the international scientific community and the community here in the United States, which has clearly established through decades and decades of research the role of human activity in climate change and, importantly, the opportunities for adaptation that exist.
But he claims that the global warming, is due to increasing sun radiation as opposed to carbon dioxide. Is there room for that argument?
Well, certainly there are natural cycles that are part of understanding the climate that operate at global and long-term scales. Climate science has incorporated and understands the role of natural cycles as well as the role of human activity in accelerating some of the processes that lead to global warming and its impacts, particularly on temperature and precipitation, as well as extreme events. So he is using a number of techniques to try to exploit uncertainty and shift people's focus away from what we fully understand to be the major causes of the climate crisis.
And yet he represents a number of people who would agree with him when he says that scientists are fabricating data to give false impressions. That means people like you. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's certainly an affront to the scientific community. The climate assessment, just for example, goes through several rounds, up to 7 rounds of review by independent scientists, by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and multiple reviews by the public through an open review process. So this process typically takes 4 full years, completely vetted, based on published, credible, peer-reviewed science, and then evaluated by both members of the public and other independent experts. The person chosen to lead the program publishes most of his opinions on Twitter.
Right. But everything you mentioned beforehand, all that documentation and assessment and reassessment and such, he calls it confirmation bias.
Yeah, again, this is a technique to distract and to obfuscate the issues, and that is not confirmation bias, that's actually the scientific process.
Okay, last question here. You become head of the agency, or you write another, what is the chapter of assessment, Southwest chapter of assessment. You decide the message that should be given regarding climate, changing climate, global warming, the whole 9 yards. What would you say?
I mean, I would return to our key message from 2023 when we published the 5th National Climate Assessment. And those messages are, we understand the climate risks and we should focus on mitigating where we can, limiting the harm that's occurring, but also the opportunities to adapt. There are great opportunities for economic advancement, for improving the lives of people all across America by making more healthy, sustainable, and economically viable communities, and we can do that with the information that this assessment provides.
All right, Dave White, ASU Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
Banner Health is a nonprofit health system that dedicates research to prevent and treat conditions including cancer and Alzheimer's disease. But medical breakthroughs can take many years of research, and with federal research funding decreasing, where does that leave nonprofit health structures? Dr. Corey Casper is Senior Vice President and Chief Research Officer at Banner Research. Good to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
All right, Banner Research. All right. Before we get to what Banner's been doing, because you've been doing a lot, the impact of declining federal funding on medical research overall.
Yeah, it's definitely a changing environment that we're in. So look, biomedical research is complicated. It takes incredible resources, and it always has taken a number of different partners to actually get definitive studies done and get the advances for medicine that we need. So there's always been a role for corporate America, there's been a role for our government, and there's been a role for the nonprofit sector. What's happening now is each of those roles are changing, and the responsibilities in each are quite different.
Talk about your sector, the nonprofit sector. How is it changing?
So the nonprofit sector is assuming more and more responsibility for researching and advancing health advances that perhaps corporate America are not interested in advancing. So if it doesn't have necessarily a bottom line that's beneficial to shareholders, it doesn't have something that the government is fundamentally interested in advancing, the nonprofit sector really has a responsibility for doing that work.
Can you work with the commercial sector, the private sector, that does seem to look for commercial pathways in virtually everything it does? That's what they're in business for you.
And I would even argue that you have to, right? So the corporate sector has resources that aren't available anywhere else. So making drugs of high quality and in high quantity, being able to provide those to wide patients and wide populations only can be done by corporate sector. But the nonprofit sector now has to take more responsibility for posing and answering questions that are affecting wide swaths of our population.
So talk about Banner here. How many active studies have you got going on? I mean, these are, I understand that they're clinical and translational.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what those words mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about how to advance a new concept for medicine, it starts often in the invention and discovery phase. So a scientist generally has to think about how might we best attack a new disease. That innovation and discovery is often done in our universities. And for Banner, our traditional partner, the University of Arizona, but we work with many different universities across the world to take those basic discoveries and think of those initial ideas. Then the role is, how do you introduce those to a patient population and test whether those concepts actually work at the bedside or in the clinic? And that's where Banner comes in. So translational research takes the ideas that come from the laboratory and translates them to patients. For instance, if you're looking to determine whether or not we can develop a blood test to figure out your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, that starts in the laboratory and then goes to the clinic. That's the translation. Clinical research is then, let's say you have a new therapy that you think could work in one of these diseases. How do you safely and effectively test it in a large population to make sure it will actually have some good? So that's clinical and translational research. Banner has over 1,300 studies that we're currently doing here in Arizona and across our network.
Yeah, and breakthroughs, FDA approval, these sorts of things, can it be in some ways easier without the federal intrusion?
Yeah, I mean, easier and harder. So in some ways, traditionally, federal funding has been a constant source of support for the enormous resources it takes to do biomedical research. More recently, that has been less reliable and has been more under threat. So what we've done at Banner and what many nonprofit research institutions have done are to try and shore up their own infrastructures to make sure that we can conduct these studies even in lapses or ebbs of federal funding.
So last question here, what does this mean to Arizonans?
Yeah, great question. What this means is that having a strong and large nonprofit healthcare delivery system in Arizona, like Banner and like some of our other partners, it means that we can fill those gaps and we can ask and answer questions that really will improve the health of people here in Arizona.
And is this the new normal?
This is the new normal.
Yeah, for even past current climate?
Absolutely. I think even in the future, we are seeing shifts that I don't think will shift back.
Interesting. Dr. Corey Casper, Banner Health Chief Research Officer. Got a lot of research going on over there. Thank you for taking time for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening.
You bet. And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Want to be more inspired? Arizona PBS delivers unforgettable